when I was standing on the scale, I'm weighing myself like 7 days a week, taking the
Yeah.
average, like normal.
Yep. Good.
1 week, I lost like 600 grams. The other week, I did exactly the same. I tracked everything. So 1 week, I gained 200 grams. Now, you also mentioned that I also want to talk about water retention. And
Sure.
what I noticed is I did like a lot of cardio. I train my legs 2 times a week. I walk 20,000 steps every day.
Wow. Okay.
20,000 steps. And on top of that, I also do cardio. But what I experience now, when I was standing on the scale, I'm weighing myself like 7 days a week, taking the
Yeah.
average, like normal.
Yep. Good.
1 week, I lost like 600 grams. The other week, I did exactly the same. I tracked everything. So 1 week, I gained 200 grams in a week.
Right.
And what I experienced was a lot of leg edema. So very weird. And I know a lot of people struggle with this. They look at their weight and the scale doesn't move. And
Right.
I have this exact same thing. And sometimes for weeks on end, I'm like,
Yeah.
I know I'm in a deficit. I feel like shit. But the weight doesn't change.
Yes.
And eventually you see a drop. And
yeah, like overnight. Yes.
I cannot explain that. And it's boggling my mind for such a long time because I still experience it. And
Stop.
and
No, not you, my dog.
Yeah, I know. And I actually stopped weighing myself because I knew I get a little bit obsessive. So I'm just doing caliper measurements for now.
Yeah, and this is, again, it's not universal, but it's common. And I found this for myself years ago because I'm I'm a little neurotic, let's be honest, and that's being polite. And when I dieted in my 20s, I got very intense, right? I was doing, daily cardio, and it's like, cut calories more. Like, and again, this was kind of goes to what we talked about, is like, it's so hard to coach yourself because I would do things, I would do things in my own training and diet that I never would let anybody else do. Exactly. But I would I'd be like, well, I'm experimenting, I'm this, and I would just do myself more harm than good. And I noticed that. And other people have too. And it's exactly like you described. Like, they know they're doing everything right? Their calories are where they need to be, they're doing the morning cardio, they're lifting, everything's right, and nothing's happening. Or their weight goes up a little bit. And this will happen for, 2-3 weeks. And a couple things can happen. One, a lot of people will just be like, you know what? Screw this. They'll take a day off because they're sick of this crap. And then they'll wake up 2 kilos lighter and be like, what the hell? And then they'll go right back to dieting too hard. That's what I dealt with a lot of personal training clients when I was younger. Or sometimes it just takes about 3 weeks. And overnight, there's what I call a whoosh. That's a word that's been in the diet world for years, where it's just like, normally we think of fat loss or weight loss. It's like, oh, you're losing, half to 3/4 or maybe 1 kilo a week, and everybody wants it to be like this, and it's not. And you'll lose, and then you'll stall, and then overnight it'll be like, I woke up 1.5 kilos lighter. What the hell is going on? And I've long believed that it is, well, I think there's no doubt that it's water retention, right? Because it has to be, right? It can't be really anything else. You're not gaining fat in a deficit. You're probably not gaining muscle in deficit under most conditions. If you're weighing daily, certainly, it's not like you're seeing those day-to-day fluctuations in body weight. Like, because what some people will do, like, oh, I weigh every Monday. That's just a non-starter, because any given day, did you poo? How many, there's so many variables. But when you're weighing weekly and averaging it, that shouldn't be an issue. And yet here it is. And something is going on. I know some people that used bioelectrical impedance scales, which I don't think of very much of generally. But what they would always see was a big change in the measurement, like right before the big drop. Like there was some, because those things are measuring water in the body, right?
Yeah.
Conductivity and water levels, something like that. So they would, this is all anecdotal, I've never seen this studies. Researchers don't study stuff like this because it doesn't occur to them. But something does happen. And actually, if you go back, right, so in the 1950s, there's this famous experiment called the Minnesota semi-starvation study, right? It gets talked about all the time. It was a military thing. They took, for 6 months, they took war objectors. They put them on 50% maintenance calories, 2 hours of forced walking a day, had to work. They weren't weight trained, very low protein. And even then they noted towards the end of the diet, some people, their body, and I mean, every calorie was controlled, right? These guys were basically, they weren't locked in prison, but they might as well. There was no cheating going on. There was no access to food. Every morsel was measured. Like literally after their food was, they would rinse it with water and make them drink, like every calorie was accounted for. And some of the people, their predicted weight loss curve, they fell off of it. And what was noted, it was known for years, was they showed incredible puffiness in the lower body, in the ankles. You know, when you get that water retention rate, you push into the skin and it sort of, and then it just very slowly comes back out. And there was a thing called starvation edema, which edema just means water retention, that was known of for years. Now, I've always thought that it was probably due to elevated cortisol levels, right? Dieting raises cortisol, exercise raises cortisol. Being crazy in the head raises cortisol. Like, again, we're all a little bit neurotic. Yeah. There's a certain personality type, certain obsessive personality type, and I'm one of them, that you just stress so hard about it. Cortisol can cause water retention. You know, now some other more recent stuff, a lot of people in the field think I'm full of shit, and that's fine. It may not be cortisol related, but there is something going on. And I don't think anyone can deny that. And you frequently see it, like I said, in certain clusters of behaviors where there's a lot of intense weight training, a lot of cardio, a lot of activity in general, low calories, a little bit of crazy going on. Those are the folks that seem to get it the worst. And something I found when I went from my 20s to my 30s, the less stressed I got about fat loss, the more effectively it happened. The less worried I was on a day-to-day basis. Because I did. I mean, you've probably done this too. You're taking caliper measurements twice a day. You're like, you know, there's the old joke about weighing before and after you go to the bathroom to see if you've gone, you know, you can get really, really crazy about this.
I know.
And it's, you know, it's easy to say stop being a crazy person, but that doesn't really work very well. So something is going on, you know, and people, sometimes it just eventually resolves itself. You know, there's another thing I've written about, and there's a lot of debate over this. When I was in college, my physiology professor told us that what happens is when you lose fat, right, you get the fat out of the fat cells fill back up with water. And then eventually that water has to be dropped. I guarantee you, people share these Instagram memes all the time, and I'm like, guys, I wrote about that in 1999. Can you please maybe give me an IO or 1999. I'm like, can you please give me an IO of credit? I guarantee you never heard about this till I talked about it. And my professor told me that there was no data. I looked for years. There's one study in obese men that their visceral fat area filled back up with water. I'm not saying it happens. Something is going on, right? Yeah. Like I'm willing, like I said, a decade after the fact, I would like to see more data on it. something is happening. Yeah, right. In fact, it's sort of this squishy feel to it.
Yeah, it kind of makes sense because the weight doesn't change. It's anecdotal with me.
Right.
And also with my clients, the weight doesn't change, but they get leaner and they do not look like puffy. So
something is happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a couple of other, again, somewhat anecdotal data points. I'm willing to, I've talked to some coaches, and another thing that's become very much more common in the modern era is, having, well, I called them refeeds originally when I wrote about flexible dieting in 2004, right? It actually goes back to one of your early questions, the whole evidence-based thing, right? Yeah. In 2004, I was like, okay, look, there is a good, like, not dieting completely clean, like not having these rigid eating patterns. Like, you should take breaks during your diet. Nobody was ready to listen because everybody knew you dieted the way Arnold dieted. You dieted the way the physique, you ate clean for 6 months straight or however long you could survive it. And that's how you got into shape. So for me to come along and go, actually, you'll get better results by doing these things. Nobody was ready to listen in 2004. Now, 15, 16 years later, that's all anybody talks about. Oh, crap. Give me 1 second.
I will not keep you up for longer.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Let me just send this text really quickly. But one thing, so now people really integrate these things. They have days at calorie maintenance for a number of reasons, hormonal, metabolic, and the coaches I've talked to that do this find that the water retention issue is much less pronounced. Because when you raise calories to maintenance, it kind of reverses a lot of those hormonal effects. Cortisol comes back down. It gives your body a break. You're able to take a day off from training if they can. So there's something going on, and it seems like the more intense you get, the more extreme you get with your diet, the more likely it is to occur. And if you kind of chill a little bit,
would you need to
it's
adjust?
Not quite as pronounced.
Would you need to adjust the weekly deficit, or can you still be in a deficit weekly and 1 day of maintenance?
Yes. Yeah, and that's the thing. And what a lot of them do, like for physique athletes, they have to be in shape by a specific day. Right? They have to get a very specific. So that's different than general dieting when you generally don't have a certain, like you've got a photo shoot scheduled, obviously. So what the coaches will do, like, okay, they're like, all right, I want a certain weekly deficit. Let's say it's just 7. Let's say it doesn't matter. Let's say it's 2,100 calories a week, 300 calories a day. Mm-hmm. If they take 1 day to maintenance, right, they have to take that 300 calorie deficit they just lost and spread it to the other days or put it on another one of those days. So they keep the weekly deficit the same by making the 6 diet days a little bit harder and including the 1 maintenance day. Yeah. And many have reported to me that, and at the end of the diet, they may be doing 2 maintenance days a week. So they've got 5 harder dieting days and 2 days at maintenance, calorie maintenance with elevated carbs or whatever the specifics are. So yeah, and even, you can trick the system briefly. My Ultimate Diet 2 did this where you can have a very high calorie day above maintenance. And when you're depleted of muscle glycogen, of calories, those calories tend to just go into the muscle. Yeah. And the body will almost keep burning fat for a short period of time. But in general, that seems to help. For some people, like water loading for 3 days, drinking extra water kind of helps tune down some of the hormones involved in water retention. That often helps with that. So yeah, but for people, when it occurs, it's a very real thing. And the mistake I see people make, and I made it, is when you hit that stall, what do you mentally think you should do?
Go
diet
harder.
Even harder.
Yeah.
And that makes it worse. Where sometimes the best thing you can do is just take a day off. Just take a day off from training, from cardio, raise your calories a little bit, or even just bring them to maintenance for a day. And frequently that will trigger that overnight loss. And then you can go back to dieting like a crazy person.